On behalf of the West Virginia Press Association and its 77 member newspapers, we welcome you to the first West Virginia gubernatorial debate of the 2016 general election. Hosting this debate is a continuation of more than 150 years of public service and the commitment of the state's newspaper industry to the fair and unbiased reporting of news and politics that generations of West Virginians have counted upon. In this service to the state, we are proud to work with West Virginia Public Broadcasting and AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that represents nearly 300,000 West Virginians 50 plus.
In co-sponsoring tonight's debate, AARP is continuing a more than 30-year history of delivering nonpartisan, fact-based information to voters. Voter engagement is not liberal or conservative, Democrat or Republican, young or old. It is simply an effort to best inform our members and the general public on where the candidates stand on the issues important to them and their families.
Now we take you live to the Walker Theater inside Charleston's Clay Center. Please welcome our moderator for this evening's debate, Ashton Mara.
Welcome to the 2016 West Virginia gubernatorial debate sponsored by the AARP of West Virginia and the West Virginia Press Association. I'm your moderator, Ashton Mara, Assistant News Director at West Virginia Public Broadcasting. Tonight, you, the voters, will have the opportunity to hear from the two major party candidates vying to be the next governor of the state of West Virginia. Our rules in just a minute, but first, let's meet the candidates. Bill Cole is the Republican candidate for governor. A resident of Bluefield, Senator Cole was elected to represent the 6th senatorial district in 2012 and has served as Senate president since 2014. In his professional life, Senator Cole is the owner of the Cole Automotive Group in Bluefield and the Bill Cole Auto Mall in Ashland, Kentucky. He's a graduate of Northwood University, Midland, Michigan, a husband, and a father of 4. Jim Justice is a native of Raleigh County but resides in Lewisburg. He's the Democratic Party's gubernatorial candidate and is perhaps best known for his work at the Greenbrier Resort, which he bought in 2009. Mr. Justice is also the president and CEO of Bluestone Industries and Bluestone Coal Corporation, as well as several other companies. He's a graduate of Marshall University and has a wife and 2 children. Gentlemen, you'll each have 3 minutes to give an opening statement. A coin toss before the debate determined your order, and Senator, you won that toss, so you'll begin.
Thank you, Ashton. First, welcome to the viewers. Thank you for tuning in. I'd like to thank West Virginia Public Broadcasting, West Virginia AARP, and the West Virginia Press Association for hosting tonight's debate. A little bit about myself. I am a 5th-generation businessman from southern West Virginia. I reside in Bluefield with my wife, Brownie, and our 2 daughters, 2 teenage daughters. I'm lucky to have both of my sons and their wives living in Bluefield as well. My sons work with me in my business. I'm probably best known for my car dealerships. I employ some 400 people. I have always strived to have good paying jobs, good fringe benefits, and certainly the opportunity for promotion and advancement. Some 4 years ago, I was frustrated with the direction West Virginia was taken. I ran for the state Senate, was elected, spent 2 years in a minority, and because of the good old boys in charge, found quickly that my voice was limited to, well, virtually 0. So had no voice, set about to recruit great candidates, helped them raise money, and in 2014 the Republicans took over control of the state Senate for the first time in 83 years. My colleagues elected me Senate President, and under my 2 years of leadership we've advanced many of the causes that are important if we're ever going to open West Virginia up to true job creation. We did legal reforms which have resulted in insurance rates coming down. We did regulatory reforms, but we're still the 50th most regulated state in the nation, and it's going to take a governor with the will to change that. We're the 26th state with the right to work. We repealed state prevailing wage, which has saved the taxpayers some $22 million in the first 3 months it's been on the books. And we repealed Joe Manchin's cap and trade, West Virginia cap and trade law. As if Obama and his EPA isn't doing enough to destroy our coal industry, we didn't need to add on with West Virginia law. My opponent wants to bill me as a career politician. Nothing could be further from the truth. I stand on my record in 2 years of leadership. My opponent also, you'll hear tonight, will come with platitudes and slogans like jobs, jobs, jobs. But Jim, I have to ask, what's your plan, plan, plan? The only plan I've heard so far is trust me, I'm Jim Justice. But quite frankly, I would ask the hundreds of small businesses that you've stiffed and settled for pennies on the dollar, how that plan to trust Jim Justice is working out for them. So Ashton, thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I look forward to a spirited and lively debate.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Justice, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody having me. You know, today when I was sitting at the house and I was thinking about this debate, I was just flipping through the TV, and very fortunately, I got to watch Arnold Palmer's funeral. A great man, a king of kings in the golf world, but a good man. I saw the choir give tribute to our good Lord and America, and Arnie would have really loved that. He was a friend. He got his first paycheck ever at the Greenbrier Hotel, if you didn't know that. And the last golf course that he'll ever design is going to be in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. It's pretty neat stuff. Now tonight you're going to hear a lot of desperation and everything because my opponent's so far behind. And he's going to throw rocks and everything else under the sun. And there's a big difference. There's a big difference between the two of us. I want to be your governor for you. I don't want a thing. I won't take a salary. I absolutely don't want a thing. Bill Cole wants to be your governor for Bill Cole. Look, just look, open your eyes. He tried like crazy to repeal the lemon law, which would have hurt us in all kinds of different directions. He's the only Senate president ever that's been cited by the Ethics Commission. Bill Cole wants to be your governor for Bill Cole. Now, I've got a lot of experience. I've done a lot of stuff. We've proven how to be 50th. We've proven that the drug situation in our state is absolutely an epidemic, and it's running completely crazy. I've got a lot of experience. I'll bring hope. I'll bring opportunity. Now, if you'll just look at what I do, I'm in the agricultural business. Ag could be a sleeping giant for us. I'm in the tourism business. In tourism, we only get the crumbs around the sides of the plate. I'll move education right to the centerpiece of where it ought to be. I'll get control of the drug situation. I'll do things, and I don't ask you to trust me. I ask you to quit trusting the other side. They've proven what they'll do. Now, you'll have a choice. You'll have a big choice, and not very long. I'll tell you just this, and I can't be more honest with you than just this. If we continue in West Virginia to elect politicians, we'll die 50th, and so will I. I said this in the debate earlier. Close your eyes. Within 600 miles of us is 2/3 of the population, the market. Absolutely, we have the 4 most beautiful seasons on the planet, and natural resources abound, and our biggest treasure is our people, our good people. This job is not that hard. That's a heck of a ball team. You just have to have somebody that can go out and sell our state.
Thank you, Mr. Justice. The rules for tonight's debate were determined by our sponsors and have been agreed to by the candidates. Each will be asked a series of questions and have 90 seconds to respond, followed by a 60-second rebuttal from your opponent. Each will also have 2 30-second challenges to those rebuttals that they may use at any point during the debate. There is no rebuttal to a challenge. It's my job, gentlemen, to make sure you stay within your time limit, on topic, and I may also ask for a brief clarification following a response, a rebuttal, or a challenge. So, let's begin. Senator Cole, you get the first question. Just last week, the state's bond rating was downgraded for the 3rd time in a year by one of the nation's top 3 crediting agencies. A downgrade means it will now be more expensive for West Virginia to borrow money for infrastructure projects. In its explanation of the downgrade, rating agency Fitch's encouraged West Virginia to look beyond coal and natural gas for a new solution to fix West Virginia's ailing economy. What is that new solution? Senator, please. please be specific.
Sure, Ashton. I think my 2 years in Senate leadership would indicate what that solution is. We need to make West Virginia a state that is conducive to the job creators. We need to have a legal system that is fair and predictable. We need to get the over-regulation, 50th most regulated state in the nation, and we have to turn that around. We have to partner with our businesses instead of being an impediment in state government. So to every extent that we can make West Virginia a place that the job creators want to be, we will have those opportunities to diversify our economy. Listen, our natural resources, our natural gas and our coal will remain important to this state forever, but we must diversify. I would argue that what we've started, and then coupled with the business and economic plan that I've made public, that's on my website, and a chief executive sales officer, the governor, going around knocking on the boardroom doors in this country, we can bring those much needed jobs, those good paying jobs to West Virginia. The bond rating is important, but it's not only the fact that we aren't diversified, it's also that our state government continues to grow, and we need a governor that has the guts and the will to right size, to streamline and modernize our state government at the same time we increase our revenues.
Mr. Justice, you have a 60-second rebuttal.
Well, the bond downgrade is important. I know stuff like this. And I'll promise you this, Wall Street loves Bill Cole. Goldman Sachs is celebrating and dancing in the street. You know why? Because they get to charge us a higher interest rate. Our counties are going to hurt because our school bonds, we're going to have to pay a higher interest rate. As far as, not long ago, everybody was ready to throw the towel in on coal. And I said, don't do that. I know something about this. Can you just really imagine, honestly, the contacts that I have? And I don't flaunt those contacts. But can you imagine the contacts, and my opponent says he can knock on boardroom doors. Can you imagine the doors that I can knock on? There are so many opportunities again. We just have to get with it.
Mr. Justice.
I'd like a quick challenge there, if I could,
Sure.
Ashton.
You have 30 seconds.
Sure. My opponent says that somehow Wall Street's celebrating that I might get elected, but my opponent's the one that's on record saying he will not raise taxes. By the way, he wants to give everybody a pay raise. He's not going to cut state government, and his solution was to build a bridge to Wall Street. So I'm not sure why Wall Street would be celebrating me as much as it might be celebrating Jim. But I'll tell you what, there's going to be a price that comes with that when Jim goes to borrow $700 or $800 million to balance our budget. There's a price that comes with that, and it's called a tax. That's the only way. You have to have a revenue source in order to pay for those bonds. So I'd argue about who Wall Street's happy with here.
Mr. Justice, continuing with this question, they're pushing us to look beyond coal and natural gas. Can you give us some specifics about diversifying the economy? And you have 90 seconds.
Well, I just thought of an idea just the other day. Now, do you realize that 77% of this state is forested today? We need to get something for that. There's a real way, a real possibility to actually maybe bring the American furniture manufacturing business back, and maybe even back to West Virginia. Today it's in China, in Vietnam, in Mexico. We need to look at that. We need to get out of our way of our universities and let them be economic drivers for us. Absolutely. If you don't believe that agriculture is a sleeping giant within this state, you're crazy. The market's right at our fingertips. And tourism, we celebrate. I say it all the time. And granted, good that we get 2 airboat jobs down on New River. But we need to be able to think big. We need the next Dollywood or the next Disney or the next clustering to really bring jobs. My opponent is not telling you right about Wall Street. He's the only person that's raised taxes. I am telling you that I would a whole heck of a lot rather have a near-term or short-term bridge Not $700 million, that's craziness and everything, but a short-term bridge to get us to the job world.
Senator Cole, you have a 60-second rebuttal.
Well, listen, again, there's no question that we need to diversify. Our state is rich with opportunity. We have natural resources that we have to depend on. We have natural beauty. Of course, tourism is one of the wonderful returns on investment that we can make. Jim brings up the timber industry, and quite frankly, we have abused in state government the timber industry for years, I believe. We treat it as a severed resource when in fact we're growing timber at 2.8 times the rate that we're harvesting it. That would tell me it's a crop and it should be under the Secretary of Agriculture. But we do have opportunities in this state. We just need to go to work to make sure that we access every opportunity. But if we don't set the stage that makes it good for our job creators, both the ones that are in West Virginia now and the ones that we want to lure here, all this is just a bunch of talk.
Let's move to the next question. Mr. Justice, this one comes to you first. Most state agencies have endured budget cuts of at least 19% across the board in the past 3 years. This year, most of those same agencies stood before legislative finance committees to say that there were no longer savings or efficiencies to be found in their departments, and continued cuts would result in employee layoffs and cuts to programs. You have both said that you support targeted cuts to continue to downsize West Virginia's government. Tell us specifically what those targeted cuts would look like under your administration.
Well, I'd say this. First of all, we've cut about all that we can cut. We can keep looking and we may find a few dollars. Just look at our teachers. You realize our teachers haven't had a raise since 2014 and PEI continues to climb. We have 600 vacancies within this state today. 600 vacancies to where we can't find a teacher to go in the classroom. You know why? Because our teachers are going out of state. People pay them more. They go out of state, good teachers and everything. Let me tell you just this, and this is just exactly fact. You will not be able to cut your way out of this mess. You've got to some way grow your way out of this mess. Revenue is there. Naturally, all of us want to. If there's something that's wasteful, get rid of it. Sure, we can save a few bucks here and there. But at the end of the day, I mean, every day we wake up and look at the television and the television says, come to Michigan, come to Michigan. Well, who wants to go to Michigan? I mean, do you want to get in a car and say, let's go drive to Detroit? I mean, are we out of our minds? I mean, really and truly, we need to promote us. There's so many opportunities that are here. We've got to grow our way out of this mess. You can't cut your way out of this mess.
Senator, you have a 60-second response.
Sure. You know, I have to agree with Jim. Our teachers are underpaid in this state. So are our corrections officers, our law enforcement, our government workers. But I'll tell you that has happened not in the last 2 years, but that's decades of failed leadership by the Democratic Party. Republicans have been in for 2 years, and somehow Jim wants you to think that we've blown it all in 2 years. We've erased all the great work that his party has done over these last decades. And yes, we can have proper cuts in state government, but we need to right size. We need to reconsider what the mission of state government is, and then figure out what we can afford. But I'm going to tell you something. When we look and we find out that we have a 7,000 vehicle fleet, that every fourth employee takes a car home with them, don't tell me there's not ways to cut and hold back the fraud and the waste, the corruption, whatever category it falls under. We do have opportunities to run state government more efficiently.
Senator, you get a 90-second response to this question now. Can I ask you, and you mentioned the state fleet, can I ask you for more specifics? Where do those targeted cuts come from?
Well, I think we started already. I think legislatively, the problem here is legislatively, these are tough things to get at. So many things in state government are funded through special revenue accounts. So we all know they're out there. All of us see examples every day of waste in maybe the highways department, for instance, and yet legislatively we don't have access to that. It's going to take a governor that has the will, the determination, the guts to stand up and do the hard lift, do the heavy lift in state government in order to make sure that our state government's there for its citizens and not as an impediment. We got to remember the citizens are the ones that pay the bills. It's their tax dollars. It's up to us to properly invest them. It'll take a governor setting the right vision and then putting leadership in place under him and the cabinet secretaries, et cetera, that share that vision, and we will drill it down just like you do in a business. It'll get down to the layer, and that becomes the new attitude within our state government. But state government needs to be there for its citizens, not against its citizens.
Mr. Justice, you have a 60-second response.
Okay, I'd like to say this. I do find a lot of fault, and that's because I'm an impatient guy. Bill Cole's been in office for up 10 years. He's been in complete control for 2 years. I can't imagine. I cannot imagine. You know, I tore the whole front of the hotel off and dug a hole 42 feet and built a casino and put it all back together in 10 months. In 100 days, I built the Saints facility. I mean, I cannot imagine looking at you 2 years into this and saying, I got to have more time. I'm too impatient. I absolutely believe, and to say, well, the Democrats were in charge before, the Democrats didn't have Jim Justice. That's all there is to it. I keep going back to the same thing. You can't cut yourself out of this. You got to have somebody that can think big, market big, and bring investors to our state and make things happen.
Mr. Justice, the question was about targeted cuts. Can you, in the next 15 or 20 seconds, just give us one example of a cut?
I really can't, and the reason that I can't is because I have not been in office. I don't see all the things that President Cole sees. I see our people hurting. I see our people absolutely just bleeding everywhere. And I don't want to take something else from our people. I mean, I don't want to cut our wages and hurt our people more. I want to help our people.
Thank you very much. Let's move to the next question. Senator, West Virginia is a rural state, which means in many areas it relies on small community schools to educate its young people. Those schools, however, come at a cost. For example, in Fayette County, residents voted against school levies for decades, leaving some facilities to be condemned. Now, the Fayette County school system is being forced to close and consolidate nearly 10 schools, even sending some of those students across county lines. With West Virginia's financial struggles in mind, do you believe the state should start reimagining the way county school systems operate, or that the state should continue to support community schools within the borders of the state's 55 counties?
To the extent that we can support community schools, of course we should, but we're the only state in the nation losing population. To not consider losing population, to not consider consolidation is craziness. But you know, we are constitutionally charged to provide a thorough and efficient education to our kids. But I'll tell you what, under decades of Jim's party's leadership, West Virginia has not delivered. We invest 21st in dollars per student, and yet we get a 48th place student achievement. That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable in any terms. So as we look at the things that ail us within our education system, everything has to be on the table. And yes, having a student go across county lines makes sense. If it's a 45-minute bus ride for the kid to go to a school in his county and it's 5 minutes across the county line, my goodness, doesn't that make common sense? I truly believe that we need to bring common sense to state government. I know that's not something often you hear in the same sentence, common sense in state government, but it's about time we started applying that common sense. We have to fight hard. We have to fight hard. We're failing our kids miserably, and we have to fight hard to make sure that we deliver that proper education. I was educated in the West Virginia public school system, and I did just fine, but that was back when common sense prevailed, and now we have a very overweighted, heavy bureaucracy in the Department of Education.
Mr. Justice, you get a 60-second response.
Okay, first of all, many of you may not know, but many of you do know. I'm a coach. I'm in the schools an awful lot. I see what our teachers are going through. And there's a lot of kids that ride a bus, and they ride a bus a long, long, long ways. But the simple fact is just this. Why do we have to continue to just restrict and crawl into a hole? Aren't we better than this? I mean, we're West Virginia. We're dying every way around us. Now, just think about this just for a second. Bill Cole wants to even have charter schools. We can't afford to pay the teachers and have the schools and fund the schools that we have today. We're going to end up with larger class sizes, a lesser education. We're going to have more people on the outside telling bad jokes about us. I want to think about education in a completely different way. I'll tell you about that later.
You actually have the time to do that right now. It's your 90-second response.
Okay, let me just tell you, I think education, we look at it completely wrong. Education needs to be the driver for all that we do. It can be an economic driver beyond belief. We need to shove it right to the forefront. We need to find a way, somehow to fund it. We always end up doing what we want to do. We've got to find within state government a way to fund it. And then let it be a driver for us. Everybody wants their kids to come and be educated in the best place. The real brass tacks facts are this: our image outside of West Virginia is not the greatest. And the very thing that most people throw rocks at us about, our education. People on the outside think we've got to kill a deer every day to feed the kids at school. It's all wrong. Our teachers are really good. They're terribly underpaid. Education can be an economic driver, and it's right at our fingertips. Higher ed can drive all kinds of economies to us. Our politicians are constantly just in the way. I've been around all over this state, and you know what I did? I listened. I did something that we've never really done before. I sat with the teachers. I sat with the higher ed people. I listened to them. I said, what do you think's wrong? Tell me what you think is wrong and how we can fix it. Again, it needs to be the very first and best thing that we do within this state.
Senator Cole, you get a 60-second response.
Sure. Well, I think we're failing our kids miserably in our education system. Jim points out that I'm a proponent of charter schools. Well, join 42, 43, 44 other states that also have charter schools. Do I believe that solves all the issues? Absolutely no. But that's just the status quo bunch afraid to try something new. And a charter school is simply an opportunity to deliver an education in a unique manner. Now, I tell you what, we say we don't have charter schools in West Virginia, but I would tell you that we have the most successful charter school ever in West Virginia, and it's called Mountaineer Challenge Academy that the National Guard operates, and that's simply a different way of delivering an education. We have a lot of work to do in our education system. There's no question, but I want to see us invert the triangle. I want the focus, instead of an overweighted bureaucracy in Charleston, to be back in the classroom on our students, on our kids, and on our teachers. And yes, we need to pay our teachers what they deserve. But we have a lot of work to do in education, but believe you me, it is the most important thing we'll ever do in this state.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Justice, this next question comes to you first. During historic flooding in June, the state suffered more than $500 million in damages to its roads, highways, and bridges. But even before that, a national transportation research group said in 2015 that 29% of the state's paved roads were in poor condition, and 13% of bridges were structurally deficient. As the state continues to struggle financially, what dedicated sources of funding to improve roads and bridges can you point to solve West Virginia's infrastructure needs?
Well, let me say this. If you weren't involved in the flood, in the 1,000-year flood, I've never been through anything in my life to even compare to that. I mean, it was sadness beyond belief. I can tell you that the damage is astronomical. Thank goodness we didn't completely raid the rainy day fund, because that's what it ought to be there for. You know, if you'll just look, and I'm not telling you junk, in 2 years, we've lost 40% of our rainy day savings under President Cole's reign. 40% of it's gone. You know, now, I would tell you just this. Senator Cole wants to, because we don't know what to do, he wants to put the counties back in charge. Let's have 55 highway departments within the counties. You know what that's going to do? It's going to go back to cronyism. It's going to go back to you get your driveway paved or you get your road paved and everything, because I know you. It's just going to raise state government. We've got low interest rates, low fuel cost. We ought to find a way to start building now. As interest rates go up and fuel prices go up, we don't have the opportunity to build. We've got to figure this out. Just because it's really hard doesn't mean you just hit the wall and say, can't do it. You got to figure it out.
Senator, your rebuttal.
Well, we started with the floods, and let me say this. I traveled the flood zone from Clendenin to White Sulphur and back for weeks after that tragic event. I was never so proud in all my life to be a West Virginian when I saw West Virginians stepping up to help their neighbors. The stories were breathtaking. And I'll never ever forget that. Jim shows his absolute ignorance of the process when he says, I caused the budget crisis. The governor and his people are the ones that set the revenue estimates each year. Last year, they overestimated by almost $500 million on a $4 billion budget. This year, we're projecting to $350 million. With the numbers that came out today, we're projecting to a $350 million budget deficit. There's a simple reason, and it's because the governor didn't want to do the heavy lift of right-sizing state government, didn't have another plan, so set a high revenue estimate in place. As far as our roads and infrastructure goes, the first place we have to go to work on is our highways department, and making sure that the graft and the corruption that exists there, and the waste, just the simple waste, because we don't think it through, we need to get that fixed before I want to go invest a lot of money further into highways.
So, Senator, you now get a 90-second response. Go ahead, sir. Okay. You get 30 seconds.
I would like to challenge this. Senator Cole was in charge and had the majority of the Senate and the majority of the House. We needed leadership. Leadership's what we needed. And what did we do? We came back into special session with him in charge of both of the entire legislature. And what did we do? We spent $600,000 of your money. That's what we did. $600,000 of your money. Threw it away. Couldn't pass a budget. Fighting amongst themselves. And they were in control. I don't like that. You're absolutely right. I absolutely don't like that. The other thing is just this. You know, and that's my 30 seconds. I'm done. I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir. Senator, you get 90 seconds to respond. Again, the question is about dedicated sources of funding to improve West Virginia's infrastructure.
Well, again, right now we have dedicated sources of funding. The gas tax is one, and one thing that our legislative leaders in Washington did was to finally pass a 6-year highway plan instead of the 1-year continuing resolutions. I'm sorry. And what that allows is proper forward planning and allocation of those resources. Nothing can be off the table, when we have to invest in infrastructure, and we talk about our highways, our roads and bridges when we talk about infrastructure, but infrastructure in the southern part of our state might sometimes be as simple as just having running water and sewer. And yes, here we are in 2016 and we're still talking about things, basic needs like running water and sewer. We have to go after our broadband access to high speed to every community in this state. It's going to be so critical for our seniors, for access to health care, telemedicine. It's the jobs of the future. So our infrastructure needs are many, and this is an investment in the future. This is an investment that West Virginians need to make, and I'll lead the charge on that, but not until we make sure that our dollars invested are getting us true return on that investment, and the waste has to stop.
Mr. Justice, your rebuttal?
Ashton, here's what I think. I think our infrastructure in this state is crumbling. We know that. We talk about middle mile all the time on broadband and everything. My opponent wants to raise taxes to get your middle mile. I want to get you last mile. Last mile will bring tourism to our state. It brings our seniors having the ability to do and workshop with one another and do lots of different things. Now, there's no question we've proven how to fail, haven't we? I've said it over and over and over. You got to have a new vision. You got to have a new plan. We got to fix our roads. We got to fix the drug epidemic. We don't even have a qualified workforce today. Drugs are rampant, and we got to do something about it. There's absolutely, just because you have been conditioned to believe there's no other recourse, don't buy it. There is. There's hope. There's opportunity.
Thank you. Senator Cole, the next question comes to you first. To date, 29 states and the District of Columbia have passed legislation allowing for the legal use of marijuana in some form. In our region, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Ohio have passed medical marijuana laws that will also bring in additional revenue as the programs are implemented. As surrounding states move toward legalizing marijuana in some form, is the state of West Virginia missing out on an economic opportunity?
Well, they may be missing out on an economic opportunity, but what I would suggest is if you go to states that embraced legalizing marijuana first, like Colorado, there's a terrible unintended consequence, and that is the huge increase in DUI, under the influence driving. And unfortunately, there's no simple breathalyzer that you can give. It's only the police officer's estimation that somebody's under the influence. Mothers Against Drunk Driving waged a great war to get alcohol and driving separated, and here we are with an opportunity to go right down that track. I would support medical marijuana. I think it is humane. I think there are too many instances. I lost my mother some months ago to very, very painful cancer, and finally the pain was so great that the only way that she could function was virtually to be knocked out. And if somehow medical marijuana would have allowed her to get rid of the pain at the same time she was able to communicate with her family, I think that would have been huge. And I know there's seizures, there's opportunities that we can help children, and it's not smoking a joint, there are pills. So from a compassionate standpoint, I'm happy to look at medical marijuana, but no way do I want to go down the track of legalizing pot. It's a gateway drug, it's proven, and I just think we open a can of worms that will be terrible for the state of West Virginia.
Mr. Justice, you have a 60-second rebuttal.
I think, again, we need to listen to someone other than the politicians and other than ourselves. There are many doctors and many experts that can tell us and advise us as to what to do about medical marijuana. I don't have a problem with that. I would probably be supportive of that. But the drug situation in this state, we got to get under control. We have to get this situation under control. It's cannibalizing us. Do you know, I was with the mayor in Huntington just the other day, and here's what he said. Can you imagine this? He said 60% of the umbilical cords at the hospital, 60% are laced with drugs. We have a real problem. Our workforce is a real problem, but with drugs. We've got to fix this. Now, you know, where we go from there as far as legalizing marijuana and whatever, I think the first thing we got to do, support, medical marijuana, fine. Absolutely listen to our experts and see where that takes us. That's another chapter.
Mr. Justice, you now have your 90-second response. As a reminder, the question is about West Virginia's economic opportunity when it comes to legalizing marijuana in some form.
Well, let me tell you this. I'm not positive of this, but I believe that Colorado brings in about $150 million from the sale of from having legalized marijuana. $150 million is a lot of money, and it can move a lot of the ticks on the dial. But it's not going to get us out of this mess. You know, it would be like this. It would be like someone coming to me saying, you know, well, it's almost, even though it may be an opportunity and it would be something that I would absolutely look at in the future, it's absolutely not for me today, because I don't think the statistics bear out the fruit of doing something that's going to bring us $150 million of revenue.
Senator, you get a 60-second rebuttal.
Well, I have to agree. Listen, there's a lot of ways that you can go raise money, but if they're not legal, moral, ethical, I mean, why would we even consider going down those tracks? We do have a drug epidemic that threatens to wipe out a generation. I've been very vocal and out front with my drug plan. It's posted on my website. If we don't get a hold of the drug epidemic, we're in deep trouble. I'm certainly an advocate of long-term treatment, as well as connecting the dots to get those people a job when that's what we always miss. We get them out of treatment and then can't get them back to work because of a felony conviction. I'll call a special session in the first 30 days of being governor. I want to enhance the drug penalties. I want mandatory minimum sentencing. I want to charge a drug kingpin if we can connect him to a drug overdose with accessory to murder. I want to send a message loud and clear to the drug kingpins: do not come peddle your poison in West Virginia.
Gentlemen, the next question goes to, I believe, Senator Cole first. No, excuse me, Mr. Justice, it comes to you first. My apologies. The expansion of high-speed internet access is a hotly debated topic. In the legislature just this year, we watched as some lawmakers supported state-funded projects, while others argued that broadband expansion should be left to the private sector. What do you believe is government's role in expanding access to broadband in the state?
I think our role is real simple, and that is government's role ought to be what will create prosperity for our people. You know, there's no question whatsoever that that private companies can carry and carry a big part of the load. But at the end of the day, we all know that if we had high-speed connectivity, and that's the buzzwords, high-speed connectivity, it would bring so many more opportunities to West Virginia. People absolutely want to work from home. Tourism could blossom in all kinds of different ways. Now, that's government's responsibility. That's what we ought to be doing. We ought to be finding a way, you know, to deliver prosperity and opportunity and jobs to our people. We don't have any jobs. When are we going to get it? We really need jobs. You know, we talk about drugs and all that kind of stuff and everything. What is the first thing when you don't have jobs? Hopelessness. What's the next thing you turn to? You turn to drugs. You know, we need treatment facilities. There's no question, and on and on and on. but we absolutely need prosperity, and that's our government's responsibility.
Senator, your 60-second rebuttal.
Yeah, I do not advocate for state government being invested in the expansion of broadband to all our communities. I think the role of government is simply to be a facilitator. The role of the governor would be to bring in all the players and charge them with the fact that we need to expand this broadband. We need to do what we need to do as state government to help that happen, but I don't want to see state government in the business. I've never seen state or federal government run a business better than a private sector business person. But high-speed broadband is critical in West Virginia. We have to do everything we can do to get it there. I've talked about it earlier. It's our seniors' access to health care. It's our kids' opportunity to telecommute, to work for a company somewhere across the globe from their own home. It is the keys to the kingdom. I will, as governor, get it done. We will have high-speed broadband connectivity throughout this state.
Senator, you now have a 90-second response. How? How will you get it done?
Well, I started down that track. Listen, we need to bring, it's simple things. It's bringing common sense solutions. When we go to string fiber around the state, nobody's brought in our utilities. Nobody's brought in First Energy and AEP and said, hey, we need on your power poles. We need to have that because it's the cheapest way that we can expand that fiber to the local communities. Listen, when this was supposed to have happened a number of years ago under then Governor Manchin's watch, we were supposed to have shovel-ready projects when the stimulus money was coming out of the federal government, and instead that money was squandered with one company. It was not invested properly. We could be so much further down the road than we are right now. It is criminal. It is a crying shame that money wasn't better utilized. But having said that, it's in the history books. We'll have to deal with it. But the role of the governor, the role of state government is simply to facilitate that conversation. Look, make it simple. Lock them in a room until they come up with a solution, but you have to create that vision. The vision has to be shared among all those providers, people in the private sector. And listen, the private sector will come up with a solution. This is in their best interest as well. It is their business. I've often said, if you can find it in the yellow pages, then state government has no business being in it, and I'm not going to start with broadband.
Thank you. Mr. Justice, you get a 60-second rebuttal.
I guess I'm just buffooned, and I don't get it. If we were going to lock them in a room to where they could come up with a solution, which is a good proposal, what have we been doing? I mean, we're hurting. Why in the world do we mess around for 2 years or whatever like that and then decide, oh, we need to lock them in a room? We needed to do that on day one. You know, Senator, you were the man in charge. You were the man that was the second most powerful man in state government. If something happens to the governor, this is your governor. You've got to move. You know the definition of committee? A committee is a bunch of individuals that individually cannot accomplish anything, but collectively they can decide nothing can be done. I absolutely think that we have wasted time. We're hurting. We've got to move. That's our job.
Mr. Justice, that's your time. Senator Cole, this question for you. Since 2008, West Virginia has cut the budgets of both 2- and 4-year education institutions by 23%. There are some institutions in the state that are, these are the same institutions that the state is relying on to both create a future workforce with more traditional professional degrees and to retrain the workers that have been laid off, like in the coal industry. It's likely that these institutions will face additional cuts as the state's economy continues to struggle. So, With budgetary restrictions in mind, which system takes priority? A system to retrain workers for skills-based jobs, or a system to educate a new workforce of the future?
You know, I got to circle back for just a minute, Jim, and you somehow lay this at the feet of the legislature, but this is the failed policies of our governors and the executive branch with regard to high speed. The cuts to higher ed are terrible. The fact that we're cutting education at all is tough to embrace. I will tell you this. State government is so much in control of what goes on in higher ed that simply if we get out of the way, get away from that over-regulating that has been the style of the leadership past, we would do more to cut the cost in higher ed than you can believe possible. So that can be a win-win. We can cut out the cost of the regulation and actually have the cost of business decrease for our higher education. We also sometimes make the assumption that every kid has to go to a four-year college in order to be successful. I would much rather be graduating kids out of high school with trade skills or the two-year community and technical colleges than the poor students that are coming out of a four-year education right now, burdened with huge student debt and no opportunity, no prospect of a job. But we need to partner. Listen, so many of the solutions that we need to find in state government will come with partnering with our higher ed, whether it's research and development opportunities. The list is endless, and I look forward to partnering with our higher education to find those solutions to move West Virginia forward.
Mr. Justice, you get a 60-second rebuttal.
Okay. Just the other day, I met with a higher ed group from Fairmont State. Enlightening. They're starving. We've cut them and cut them and cut them and cut them. Now we're to this point. We're to the point to where the services that they were willing to, or that they were able to offer students to help them through and get them to graduation, those have got to go to the wayside. All we can do is offer the classes now. Now, think about this. Then we're actually forced to try to put them through like a bunch of herd of cattle and everything to up the graduation rate. If you look in the eyes of the students, you see students that are falling to the wayside because a lot of the services that they had at the school are gone. You see students that are falling to the wayside with big debt. And you see graduates with big debt. Promised scholarship, they're worried to death. They come out of school and they look like crazy for everywhere and they can't find a job. You know, higher ed could be an economic driver for us.
Mr. Justice, I'm going to stop you there. You do get a 90-second response. You can continue now. Okay. Do you realize that West Virginia University, our universities in the state, our universities and colleges in the state of West Virginia contribute $2.7 billion of economic impact to our state. West Virginia University is about $1.4 billion. Marshall's about $400 million. Our colleges are contributing lots and lots in lots of different ways. You know, they're our think tank. They're graduating their future, our best and our brightest. They're the people that we ought to be going to and saying, give us ideas within West Virginia. Give us the ideas that will create job growth. Give us the next, niche crop and everything that can give us an opportunity to market within that 600-mile area to all those people. Give us the next furniture manufacturing possibility. Give us the fact that we're not giving up on coal, and there's all kinds of alternative uses for coal. But in addition to that, give us clean coal. There's so many things within our state. We always say about gas. Natural gas just fell out of the sky on us, did it not? Well, when it did, our universities are a big player. Our colleges are a big player. We need a cracker.
and I need to quit dropping my pens.
Thank you, Mr. Justice. Senator, you get a 60-second rebuttal.
Sure. One of the points in my economic development plan deals with creating an endowment that will help to attract world-class researchers to West Virginia. I do believe that research and development opportunities in West Virginia we miss the opportunity more often than we hit it. We've done some wonderful work out of WVU, the whole thing with VW. I mean, those are really phenomenal, but because we're so Charleston-centric and we set so many rules, we can't attract the world-class researchers because we're not willing to pay them what it takes to get them here. With this endowment fund, we can augment those salaries and get them here, entice them, lure them to come here, and then they know where the money is. They know how to access those federal grants, and then they can be self-sustaining. Every time you do an R&D center like that, it becomes a business incubator, and it doesn't have to be in just Morgantown or in Huntington. It could go to Beckley. It can go to other parts of our state that need the help.
Gentlemen, we have just a few minutes left, and so as your moderator, I get the opportunity to change the rules. I'm going to ask you both one more question and give you 60 seconds to respond.
Okay.
You both are running on platforms as businessmen who can change West Virginia's economy for the better. But how do you plan to separate your business interests from your responsibility as governor? Mr. Justice, we'll start with you.
Well, it's real simple. I'd ask you to look around and everything and find anything that I've ever told you that I do that I haven't done. The next thing is just this. I'm not halfway in. Everything I do, I'm all in. Now, to prepare myself, I have a wonderful son and a wonderful daughter, and I'm really, really proud of them. My son is going to have to run our coal business and our ag business. And I can tell you there's a big giant hurricane bearing down on our crop in North Carolina right now, and it's going to hurt a lot of people. But in addition to that, my daughter is a doctor now. She's come home. She's been very interested in the Greenbrier forevermore in our hospitality businesses. I've made her the president of the Greenbrier, and she'll do great. And Elmer Capolse, who is the president of Glade Springs, I moved him over to the Greenbrier, and he'll help tremendously as well. You see, I've positioned myself to be your governor. I'm ready.
Senator, 60 seconds. How do you separate your business interests if you're governor?
Well, interestingly enough, I didn't hear the coach talk about that he's committed to run both his girls and boys basketball teams, which coincidentally happens to be at the same time that session is in. So I'd be interested in that. I think if you look at what I've done for the last 2 years in my business, I am blessed to have my two sons there, and I'm blessed to have an incredible general management team. When I took over leadership 2 years ago in the state Senate, I dedicated virtually all of my time to West Virginia. And certainly nothing will change. West Virginia has full-time problems, and it requires full-time solutions, and it needs a full-time governor. I'm that man. I'm the one that will dedicate 24/7 to what's good for West Virginia and what's good for West Virginians and how we can move our state forward. In my last 2 years, I've spent less than 1% of my time with my businesses. So I think my record would speak for itself.
We've reached the end of our debate this evening. I'm sorry, Mr. Justice, we're out of time.
No problem.
We want to thank both candidates for their participation here tonight. As a reminder to you watching at home, early voting begins Wednesday, October 26th. Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. I'm Ashton Mara from all of us here in Charleston. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we both left a rebuttal
Challenge on the table.
I was ready.
Yeah, I couldn't keep control of my pens.
WCHSTV.com. I'm Rick Lord from Eyewitness News, and we have assembled 2 panels tonight to kind of go over what we just saw in the first gubernatorial debate of the 2016 election. A diverse group. Joining me first from your left to right, Mike Meyer from the Wheeling Register, News Register and Intelligencer, Katie Coyne from the Daily Athenaeum up in Morgantown at WVU, and Brad McElhaney from Metro News. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let's just begin right off the top. We were hoping, obviously, and Brad, I'll start with you, to get into some specifics here. Obviously, these candidates have had a bit of a free roll to this point. Jim Justice not doing any debates during the primary, Bill Cole running unopposed. There were opportunities to really delve into some specifics. Do you feel like they answered questions specifically tonight, or was there a lot of dodging and talking points out there?
No, I wouldn't even call it dodging and talking points. I was very familiar with the points that they made because I've read so much that they've had to say already. But they did speak in broad terms, more of a vision, and I thought they differentiated themselves on the role of state government. From the justice viewpoint, there was talk of government's role is to bring prosperity to the people. From Cole's viewpoint, it was more like, to talk in a justice way, like a point guard. You set up private business for success that lifts the boats. So I thought that's how they differentiated themselves.
And that was typically among party lines there, even though Justice is running as a moderate, some would say Manchin Democrat. The Republicans are for less government. Democrats want a bigger role for the government. And Mike, let me bring in you on this. It was interesting at one point, Bill Cole almost acted like he wanted the government to get out of certain things, as a Republican would, but in other instances he said that there is a role of government. The styles are very contrasting. Bill Cole, obviously, although he'll paint himself as an outsider, he's been in the role of a politician as Senate president for the last couple of years. Do you feel like he's walking a tightrope there with the balancing act in an election cycle where a lot of people are railing against the establishment?
I think Mr. Justice's strategy is fairly clear. It's to portray Bill Cole as the establishment politician. At one point he said Bill Cole's been in office for umpteen years. Well, actually it's about 4 years. What was interesting to me was the contrast of Bill Cole, the political technician who can get things done, with Jim Justice, who was selling himself more than he was selling policies.
And that's worked for him.
Yes.
He rolled in the primary, and this is a guy that's really selling personality. He's likable. He's a likable guy.
Right.
People connect with him in some form. But you look at most of the slogans that he throws out there, close your eyes, imagine. I mean, he's running on a conceptual campaign. He really tries to stay away from specifics, and he'll admit, I don't know much about government, and he uses that as a positive.
And he has a perfect defense in his mind to Cole's tactic, which is reminding people the Democrats had control for 80-some years. And Justice's reaction to that was the Democrats didn't have Jim Justice.
Katie, you're up in Morgantown. Jim Justice has statewide name recognition. Bill Cole maybe not so much. A lot of people say that north of Charleston, a lot of people don't even know who Bill Cole is. So that's his challenge, to get his name out there in the northern panhandle and the eastern panhandle. Up in Morgantown, what's been the pulse of this race so far?
I mean, it's been pretty silent, if we're being honest. There hasn't been a lot of talk about the governor's race, and there hasn't been a lot of talk about the senator's race either. It's been all focused on national, which makes sense at the same time, but you need to look at what's going on for the students too, and they talk a lot about that, and I don't think students tend to realize, and more so than students, but even in Morgantown, in that area where your economy is built around this university, they don't talk about what the governor's policies are going to do to them. And they talk about diversifying the economy. Those are conversations that we have on campus a lot about putting into our research, and they touched on that, but I don't think anyone around us tends to realize that diversifying the economy and that research can be implemented through these people, not through these bigger
investing
players.
in people.
Yeah.
And that's a catchphrase, diversify the economy. You hear that everywhere. But when you get to, okay, how do you do that? That becomes the challenge. There was talk about broadband. That's a huge issue. It's 2016. There were recent reports saying that only half the state, really, for the most part, has acceptable broadband access. Some anywhere between a quarter and a third is underserved or unserved. Millennials, they don't want dead spots. You know, in this day and age, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Do you feel that that's talked about maybe too infrequently in this campaign?
I do. I don't think a lot of people realize it's as big of an issue as it is, because if you're not used to having broadband in your life, you don't really know what you're missing, especially high-speed broadband. Even in Morgantown, where we tend to be the center of young culture, I guess I would say, in West Virginia, all we have is Comcast and Frontier, and I will tell you, our internet there is still half as slow as it could be. And I think they both made really good points that having better broadband would diversify this economy and give us more jobs and more opportunities with these jobs. I think Justice said stay-at-home jobs and outsourcing, kind of, where we could work for countries and for other companies that aren't necessarily based here. Those are big opportunities that would end up bringing money to the state, and investing in this broadband would bring that here. And I thought it was really interesting that they both differentiated, where Cole says, I would not have state-funded broadband, and Justice is the polar opposite. Obviously, that's a little bit expected between where they stand, but you need to look, if they're looking at making this economy, this is the first step there. This is the first step on connecting people on every plane, and connectivity is what's going to get us big.
A crucial step. Brad, have you ever seen a race like this before? It's where one guy
the presidential race.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there is an interesting juxtaposition here in a state that most experts believe will go heavily Republican nationally for Donald Trump. You have a Democratic candidate for governor here that has a lot of Trumpism to him. He's a likable Donald Trump almost.
He is, and they didn't do anything that I didn't expect tonight. But I don't think that I or Katie or Mike are necessarily the audience they were going for. We're pretty familiar with what they have said already, and to talk more broadly, maybe that was a good way to go. I did think it was interesting, their views again of state government. For Bill Cole, it was a lot of talk of right sizing, of cutting, of streamlining, of making more efficient. With Justice, what I heard was, it's not that hard, I can do it, why does it take so long? And those are two. One is a more critical view of government, the other is a more optimistic, I suppose.
Is he selling a dream?
Yeah, I think so. It's connecting with people and making people share your dream. I wonder if it were that easy, why hasn't it been done already? And if there were, we need to think big, we need to do tourism, we need to have a crop that's the greatest for West Virginia. I actually think there are very smart people in the state, and that Jim Justice is not necessarily the only smart person. So in some of these things where I hear fewer specifics, I wonder, why hasn't someone thought of that before?
Right, and he always seems to turn it back to tourism, agriculture, saying bringing the next Dollywood to West Virginia. Is that in and of itself, Mike, enough?
Well, it's not enough in that you have to say how you're going to bring the next Dollywood, or how you're going to bring in furniture manufacturers. And that wasn't said. Now, I do have to say, in Mr. Justice's defense, didn't hear a lot of specifics from either candidate tonight. They said basically what I think everyone expected them to say. I don't think this would have changed any minds. One interesting thing about the comparison with Donald Trump, West Virginia probably will go for Donald Trump by a greater percentage than any other state. But I think you have to be careful in comparing Trump and Justice, in that on the national stage you have Trump against what people perceive as an anti-coal candidate, Hillary Clinton.
Correct.
In West Virginia, you have two pro-coal candidates. So you have to be a little careful with the Trump comparison.
I agree with you on that. Legalization of marijuana was brought up again today. It's worked for Colorado economically. Bill Cole said that there were ramifications of that, although if you look at the DUI for marijuana, they actually decreased from 2014 to 15 in Colorado. When you get into a dire situation, sometimes you do things that you wouldn't expect. You would expect a Republican to take a hard stance against legalizing recreational marijuana, but in a state where there's no more fat to cut off the bone and there's a dire need to grow revenue, is that something that might be looked at, do you think?
I do think it should be. If it will be, I don't know. I guess I could say. I will say I agree with you. I was surprised to hear Bill Cole adamantly say, or not Bill, yeah, Bill Cole adamantly say, I would support medical marijuana, but we won't legalize pot. He made that really clear distinction there of the two, and he said it's not smoking a joint, it's helping people. And Jim Justice was kind of the opposite of that. He didn't really touch on it. And I think something that we tend to forget too is not just legalization of marijuana as a drug, but hemp. Hemp is a big, big field that we could break into, and we have at WVU, I mean, we have clubs that are dedicated to the hempsters. They do all this crazy stuff to try and get this growing in the state, and they have all the studies that say this could help us right now, and it's not even being looked at. And at least I don't feel like it is. And when you get on this talk of marijuana, I think a lot of the stigma there, like we said, he brought up the DUIs and stuff, it's not really looked at from the factual perspective of that's not true. It's kind of a stigma, and it's kind of a stereotype that we're giving to it. We're not looking at the realities of what our economy needs right now, and that's a big opportunity.
Brad, this has received zero traction in the past, none whatsoever. Does desperation sometimes motivate legislators?
You know, there was a bill that came up in the House, and I think there was maybe one sponsor, and it got some press, but it didn't seem to go very far. You know, when Jim Justice talks about a niche crop for West Virginia, sometimes I think, is that what he means?
Yeah, it's agriculture.
Agriculture, right, yeah. So, you know, one of the good things about the state system is states are each an experiment. There are 50 experiments for governing and for economics, and you can look at other states and see what they're doing, and West Virginia would not be first out of the gate on this.
Right.
So some governor at some point, if it succeeds in Colorado and other states, Washington, maybe we'll look at how their model is working, maybe under a few more years of seeing how it works, and there may be a push.
Mike, what's your take on this? Up in Wheeling, you're sandwiched between Ohio and Pennsylvania. When gambling table games was passed here in West Virginia, the racetrack up there saw a nice little push. Now that it's legal in Ohio and Pennsylvania, that's decreasing.
Yes.
Is this another one of those slippery slopes where you have to be careful of what you're getting into?
Well, I don't think it's a slippery slope that we're going to go down in West Virginia. Too many West Virginians have seen too much damage from the drug abuse crisis that I don't think there is much sentiment in favor of taking even the smallest chance of aggravating it. You have to remember, West Virginia is still a very conservative state in many ways. So medical marijuana, maybe, but recreational, not for a while.
Not for a while, unless, is there an asterisk there? Because it's set to raise about $1 billion, that's with a B, for the state of Washington in this next fiscal year. That could solve a lot of problems, but again, you're opening a Pandora's box in a lot of ways.
West Virginia propped up its state revenue with lottery money. And yes, people are conservative, but they were willing to embrace that lottery money, even to the point of turning gray machines into legalized gambling in your shop on the corner. That's drying up because other states have found out the same trick. So who knows what step West Virginia may take if times get hard enough.
All right, we're going to start wrapping this up. I'm going to come down the way here, starting with Mike. Did this move the needle at all tonight, you think, for anybody that was still deciding?
I don't think so. I think people heard and saw what they have heard and seen, what they expected. Both candidates seemed very comfortable. There were no gotcha moments, so I don't think this changed a lot of minds.
Katie?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think a lot of what we heard tonight is what we've been hearing off screen in the past few months. And when you look at the realities of what they're talking about, it's still really broad, and those broad things, they're not leading to plans, and that's what we need right now. We need a plan. And even all the declarations, Cole had a few declarations, but they're things that we already knew. One thing I wish they talked about was brain drain and keeping jobs here after graduation, and they touched on it a little bit, but that would have been a great thing that I think they could really sway the younger voters.
And that's tough. I mean, obviously in a state that skews older, if you look at all the demos from all the elections, the people that get out to the polls tend to be older voters. So millennials are in a tough spot where they're not really in a state where they can really exert a lot of influence. Yeah. But if you can get them all in one block, it can make a difference in a tight race. Brain drain, you mentioned, a lot of kids, they go to school here and then they leave and they never come back.
Yeah.
What can be done to keep talent here in state, do you think?
I think it's, like we've talked about before, putting it into research. And I think the broadband would also help, because there's more opportunities with broadband. There's more jobs there. But it really breaks down to giving them something to stay for. And I know that sounds very broad, but everyone that I talk to now says the worst thing that they could do for their careers is staying in West Virginia, because there's nothing here for them, even away from jobs. Just As far as infrastructure goes, no one wants to stay. Like they said, it's crumbling. There's absolutely nothing here right now when you're so central to Pittsburgh and Ohio and everything else around us. It's such an easy avenue to take instead of staying here and trying to fight your way through a system that's advertly against you.
Brad, what's your takeaway from tonight?
Yeah, back to the earlier question, I was live tweeting the event, and what I noticed when people interacted, they were interacting somewhat predictably. The party they supported were the ones they were retweeting or reacting to. I will say, maybe you didn't hear as much about specifics that might sway you, but I do think that West Virginians who watched tonight might have gotten the broad strokes and might feel like if they were not familiar with either of these guys through their earlier roles in life, maybe they got a sense of personality and general characteristics.
All right, Brad McElhaney from Metro News, Katie Coyne from the Daily Athenium, and Mike Meyer from the Wheeling News Register and Intelligencer. Thank you guys for joining us tonight, and we'll have our second panel in just a moment, but first let's throw it over to Tom Hunter, who has some more for us tonight. Tom?
Rick, thank you so much. A wonderful evening here at the Clay Center. It was a full house to watch the debate here at this invitation-only debate party hosted by AARP West Virginia and the West Virginia Press Association. Joining me now are the leaders of those two statewide organizations, Gayleen Miller, the state director with AARP, and Don Smith, who is the executive director of the West Virginia Press Association. Don, I want to start with you. I know in terms of the Newspaper Association, you have over a 150-year commitment to unbiased, fair coverage, particularly in an election season here in the state of West Virginia. And how much does it mean for those 77 member newspapers that your organization represents across the state to have this type of event here and provide it to a statewide audience?
Giving the people around the state a chance to hear the candidates talk tonight and to compare issues and positions is so vitally important. Our papers will follow up with that this week with coverage in addition to this panel tonight. And it is a commitment that we take very seriously. Our editorials are coming up. We have endorsement week where our papers will voice their support for different candidates. And the one thing that I can encourage, we had great discussion tonight, but take time and look at the AARP voter guide. These candidates also discuss some key issues we didn't get to in this format because of the time constraints, but look at their comments on supporting caregivers, on helping West Virginians save for retirement, on making West Virginia more age-friendly. AARP put out a tremendous product. It's a companion to this debate and to these panels, and we hope everyone takes time to see that. So that's more information that our papers and our co-sponsor is providing. We hope everyone follows that.
And Don, I know you mentioned a big week coming up for the member papers as they'll issue their endorsements, but probably more important to note, tonight's event hosted by two statewide nonpartisan organizations because as an association, the Press Association does not endorse candidates, correct?
No, we don't. And again, that's the reason we partner with AARP West Virginia. As organizations, we don't. Certainly, your members have their opinions. Our papers have their opinions. But we, as organizations, provide a nonpartisan format and an environment so they can come, know they're treated fairly, know they have a chance, and that everyone in West Virginia gets to see it without flavor from the sponsors.
And certainly, Gayleen, there was a lot of 50-plus representation in the room tonight. I know several AARP volunteers from across the state made the trek in for the event. Talk about how important those issues are, particularly for the voters in West Virginia, because the amount of family caregivers and the number of West Virginians that issue touches here in the state.
Right, Tom, so as you know, we have 300,000 AARP members in West Virginia, and about the same number of West Virginians serve as family caregivers. So again, I think it's an issue that touches everyone. It crosses party lines, it crosses all the demographics. So where the candidates stand on those kinds of issues is extremely important to the voters. And we know that bringing a forum like this to West Virginians to talk about the issues that are foremost on their minds and know where the candidates stand on those issues is, again, I can't underestimate the value of that for the voter to know where the candidates stand on those issues that are important to our members, the general public, and their families.
Talk a little, Galen, about the partnership with the West Virginia Press Association, because there's a lot of similarities, if you will, because a lot of those members 50 plus in that AARP demographic, Don, are many of your readers across the state.
Absolutely.
Talk about how valuable that partnership is and how valuable it is to have that opportunity through the community newspaper network to reach those individuals.
Well, again, I think our newspaper industry, particularly in a small rural state like West Virginia, really is the voice for our members, for their readers, who are really the same folks in many instances. And the online presence that our newspapers are starting to have increasingly across the state is another way, another tool, like our video voter guide will be on the West Virginia Press Association's website. It really is a great partnership. It's a nice way to marry the kinds of common thinking, like-minded kinds of ways that we work together. And again, I enjoy working with the Press Association and look forward to continued opportunities.
And taking a little bit of a look ahead to those of you that might be jumping away from our coverage at the top of the hour to watch the vice presidential debate. I know on a national level, AARP has launched its Take a Stand campaign to really encourage the presidential candidates to share their positions on Social Security and strengthening Social Security for the future. And Galen, one of the notable absences from that first presidential debate, moderated by Lester Holt, was the fact that Social Security was never mentioned.
That's right. And so AARP is speaking with one voice across the country to encourage Anderson Cooper and Martha Raddatz to ask a question about Social Security. We know it's a bedrock program that provides untold benefits for our members, for people 65 and older. And it's something that's hugely important to Americans and particularly to West Virginians. So hopefully tonight we'll get to hear at least from the vice presidential candidates where the candidates stand on Social Security and updating it for the future.
Don, Galen, thank you so much for your leadership, and thanks to your organizations for hosting such an important event. I've said all week, traditionally we've heard from the candidates one time during the general election season in the gubernatorial race. This year we get to hear from them twice in 2-hour-long debates. Glad you guys could lead things off, and looking forward to hearing again from them next Tuesday.
Absolutely. And if I could, we know that our readers and the AARP members vote. We encourage everyone to go out to the polls, cast your ballot, learn as much as you can, watch this debate, look at the AARP voter guide, follow the next debate, cast your ballot, make your vote count.
Tuesday, November 8th.
Tuesday, November 8th it is. Rick, we'll send it back down to you for our next panel discussion.
All right, Tom Hunter, Associate Director of AARP. Thank you, Tom. And yes, our second panel has joined us tonight. From your left to right, Rob Byers from the Charleston Gazette-Mail. Thank you, Rob, for joining us tonight. Lexi Browning from the Parthenon at Marshall University, and Ann Eli from the State Journal. All right, guys, let's get right into it. Rob, I want to start with you. We were hoping tonight, the first debate, first time these two men have really been in this kind of a format, to get to some specifics. Do you think that they delved into that at all?
Very few specifics there. I really would have liked to hear more. Very little mention of coal. I was kind of surprised about that in a West Virginia debate, but without the mention of coal, it really opened up the chance to talk about specifics for economic diversification. We heard a little bit about agriculture, a little bit about furniture making, but they really, I would have liked to see him go deeper on that.
It's almost like Jim Justice, when he says agriculture, he kind of beats around the bush, so to speak, with legalizing marijuana. Do you think that that's what he has in mind when he says that there's a crop out there that can bring revenue to West Virginia?
I don't think so. I haven't followed him in that direction. I mean, he is a big agriculture guy, and anytime we've discussed this with him before, it's always like the new perfect tomato or something like that is what he's looking for. So no.
He does seem to be selling a dream to a lot of people, but he's connecting emotionally with an electorate out there. I mean, he outperformed the polls in the primary, even though he shied away from debates. He's kind of stayed back from that, and he's just letting his numbers run rampant. I mean, he got 50% of the vote in a primary that a lot of people thought would be a lot closer than that. Are people like connecting with this guy in some way?
I think so, just because of his personality. He kind of dialed down the homespun tonight, which is a little different for him. But he's affable. He's an optimist, and he's just trying to kind of ride that wave and hope the West Virginians will agree with him on that.
Bill Cole talked a lot about putting the foundation in place to grow the economy. One aspect of that could be broadband. I want to talk to Lexi about this because at a university there, that's a big issue for millennials, connectivity. 50% of this state only has acceptable broadband. Up to a third, depending on what polls or studies you look at, are under or unserved from broadband connectivity. That's a huge problem that maybe a lot of older voters don't understand. As a college student, with those students, how important is it to be well connected, high-speed broadband?
Well, as a college student, it is absolutely vital that we have great internet connection, simply because that's how we rely on, not only getting our homework, because we have to send everything online, and if you don't have connectivity, then there's no possible way to send in your assignments, or if you're on a deadline for a newspaper, or send over your newspaper to the Gazette Mail to have it printed. Internet's vital. I use it in every way, shape, and form.
And all of us in what we do for a living, I mean, that's vital to have broadband connectivity. We're lucky in Huntington, Charleston, we have that kind of access. A lot of those rural areas don't, and it's not just exclusive to journalism. There are a lot of careers that depend on that, and they mentioned you could have some more flexibility with working at home and whatnot. Do you feel that this is under talked about in this election so far?
Absolutely, and I think it's going to be an incoming buzzword that we're going to hear from both candidates, simply because we touched a little on the implementation and how vital it is that we have high connectivity in the entire state, but we didn't really touch on how we could fund that, or how we could really achieve that, because my parents and I lived in Mason County growing up, and we tried 7 different internet services, it seemed, and none of them worked, and they all had the promise, hey, we're going to be able to do this, but it just wasn't feasible. So I think that's something that you're going to hear a lot about this upcoming election, and I felt that both candidates were, ironically, that they are businessmen. They were trying to sell themselves. They were too busy focused on selling themselves rather than digging into policy. But
the contrast of styles is striking. And did anything surprise you tonight?
Well, it more than anything made me want to make sure I pay attention to next week's debate, because I want to see more. But I think someone had already mentioned it. We got the Jim Justice that I think we all have met and known. That's interesting. He was a little bit dialed down for Jim Justice, but you saw he was leaned forward. He was on his elbows. He was looking around a lot, whereas you saw, Senate President Cole was dead ahead, staring right into the camera, pretty serious, pretty.
You could tell that he prepared.
Well, he seemed to be more formal, I guess. He was. I noticed that he didn't want.
Do you think that was by design? You're not going to out justice Jim Justice, right?
But you know what? There were a few times when the Senate President almost got a little more casual or folksy, and I feel like he looked and sounded a little better when he did sort of relax a little bit. And so they both have sort of these images that they need to, in one way, protect, but in another way, maybe stretch from in order to reach some other people.
With 1 month left, Rob, do you think it's important for Cole to loosen the collar, so to speak, and to kind of project some charisma?
I do think he looked a little stiff up there, but he's the more traditional candidate. He's the Senate president. He wants to look professional, and I think he came off that way. And like you said, I mean, Justice is such a unique character. He's so different that it would be crazy for Cole to try to replicate that. So, and
it's hard to argue. It's worked for Justice so far.
It does.
Lexi, what's the pulse like out in Huntington at Marshall University for this race? Do you feel like the kids are excited, or are they disinterested?
It's about 50-50. I wouldn't say that there's a certain level of disinterest, but I think everybody's pretty much focused on the presidential election for right now, at least in the midst of the last debate. But, I think as it picks up and the season goes on, I think people are going to be a little more invested in their local state races.
All right, real quick, I just want to go down the line here because we're running out of time. Rob, what's your big takeaway from tonight?
Big takeaway, no clear winner here. I think if people had their minds made up, and if they didn't have their minds made up, they're gonna be drawn to one candidate or the other, because even though they agree on so many issues, they are such different people.
Ann?
Well, they're going to have to get into details. People want those details. We can't just say we have to find a way, we're going to find a way. How? Details. But they also need to watch, because a couple of times Bill Cole talked about the budget, he was getting down into the weeds, and the people at home don't care about the special account revenue budget fund.
Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I want to thank Ann Alai from the State Journal, Lexi Browning from the Parthenon at Marshall University, and Rob Byers from the Charleston Gazette Mail for joining us for this roundtable discussion. Your vote, your future. The election getting close, November 8th, so get out there and exercise your right. Until next time, I'm Rick Lord for Eyewitness News. Have a great night.